Hello! Today's set of notes is on cell structure and function. In these notes, I'm going to go over the organelles of a cell. Organelles just means cell parts. So all of the structures that you would find inside or around a cell are called organelles. So for each organelle, I'm going to go over what it looks like, what its function is, and give you an analogy of its function to an everyday thing, just a comparison. Also, I'll tell you what types of cells they are found in. All living things are made of cells, but some cells are really simple, bacteria cells called prokaryotic, and other cells are more complex and have more organelles called eukaryotic. And then there's going to be difference between plants and animal cells that make us different living organisms. So I'll tell you which organelles are found in which types of cells and describe the structure and function of each one. For each slide, you can pause it and fill in the notes found in the link in the description, or you can just watch the video straight through. So for the first organelle, we're going to start with all cells. So these three structures we're going to talk about are amongst the simplest cells to the most complex and are really the defining features of cells. So the first one is the cell membrane. This is your outer layer of the cell. So it encloses the cell, and its main job is to control the passage of materials. We sometimes need things to come into the cell, like oxygen and nutrients. We sometimes have waste and things that are no longer working that need to exit the cell. And this cell membrane is going to be what controls that. All cell membranes are made up of a phospholipid bilayer, which is seen in the picture here. These yellow heads with tails, you have two layers of them, and this is pretty unanimous amongst all cells. Some cells will have multiple layers of cell membranes, some will have extra features like a cell wall, but all cells have at least one cell membrane. And like I said, its job is to control what goes in and out. So its comparison is to a security guard or any security measure that controls who has access or entry into a location. The next one is cytoplasm. So cyto means cell and plasm basically means goo. This is the cell goo. And this jelly-like substance is found in all cells as well. It fills in the open space of the cell and is going to surround and cushion organelles. So basically anything that's sort of that tan yellow goo-like substance in the picture, that's the cytoplasm. There's really nothing clever to compare this to. It's like Jell-O. If Jell-O holds things in place and you put fruit or something decorative in the Jell-O, it's still going to be kind of floating, but it's going to be pretty secure in there. So it's just like a Jell-O substance that fills everything in. The last organelle that is found in all cells is called the ribosome. So ribosomes are very tiny dots if you look at a picture. So in this picture here, they kind of look like the freckles on the cell, and they are very important. They are going to make proteins. Proteins are essential to most all structures that living organisms need, and they are going to help with all chemical reactions that living organisms need. So ribosomes are found in all cells. They are spread throughout the cytoplasm, and they can also be found on the surface of other organelles. I compare ribosomes to factory workers. So the factory workers are putting the pieces and components together to make a final product. So this is what ribosomes do. They're putting together components to build those proteins that are essential for all living organisms. Now, those are the things found in all cells. Now we're going to move to additional organelles that are found in eukaryotic cells. So these are going to be your multicellular, more complex organisms. So both plants and animals will have all of the features that we talk about in this section. The defining feature of a eukaryotic cell is called the nucleus. So if you have a nucleus, you are a eukaryotic cell. The nucleus is labeled as the control center of the cell. And this is because the nucleus contains DNA. DNA is the code and the blueprint for all living systems, It is going to give you the information of what makes you who you are and tell you all your characteristics. So the nucleus is very important for containing and protecting that information. So in the picture of the cell here, it's that pink sphere. It's cut open so that you can see the rest of it. It's usually just like a solid sphere that you can see pretty easily in a strong microscope. So the nucleus has some components to it. Inside of the nucleus is a smaller sphere, sort of like the yolk of an egg, called a nucleolus. Here it's represented as the yellow sphere. This is very small and dense, and this is where those ribosomes are produced. So those ribosomes that make all the proteins that are spread throughout the cell, this is where they start. They are made inside of this nucleolus. The outer layer of the nucleus is called the nuclear membrane. It's very similar to your cell membrane. It is a membrane to control what goes in and out. So we want to keep the DNA from leaving, but we need those ribosomes to exit so that they can go and start making proteins. So some things stay in and some things leave. And so these components make up the nucleus. So like I said, it's called the control center of the cell. So you can compare it to mission control at NASA or any area where there's like a large database and all the information is stored to send out to a company or a team of some sort. Next, we're going to talk about the endoplasmic reticulum, also known as the ER. So again, this is specific to eukaryotic cells. You will not see an ER in a bacteria or prokaryotic cell. So the ER are these flattened membranes that sort of make this maze-like structure that you can see in the picture here. There's two parts to the ER, the rough ER and the smooth ER. So the rough ER is covered in ribosomes. And I said that ribosomes can be found on the surface of another organelle, and this is the one. So the ribosomes can stick to the outside of this ER, and if you were to expand the ER and make it something that you could pet, it would feel very bumpy as you slid your hand across it, very rough, like sandpaper, because of the number of ribosomes on it. So the rough ER's main job is to modify and really start the movement of proteins, because we know ribosomes are making all of those proteins, and so then they'll go through the ER, get that extra layer of coating, get any last minute touches, and start their process of being sent out to where they need to go. The smooth ER is not covered in ribosomes. So if you were petting the smooth ER, it would not feel bumpy. It is represented as the orange membranes in the picture here. So the smooth ER is actually focused on synthesizing lipids. These are your fat molecules. They're also the type of molecules that make up the cell membrane. And so this is going to have a different job, but the ER is together working on modifying and shipping your proteins and creating and modifying your lipids. And so I compare this to a factory, because we said the ribosomes are your factory workers actually putting the product together. The factory is going to house those factory workers and be the location of any last minute touches or adjustments that need to be made. The next one I find very interesting as an organelle. It looks similar to the ER, but it's generally further away from the nucleus, and it's going to have a different function. This is called the Golgi apparatus. So we have these sacs that are flattened, similar to how the membranes are flattened in the ER, but their job is to sort, modify, and package anything that needs to be moved around or even outside of the cell. I compare this to your post office or your UPS of the cell. So you'll see in the picture here, there's these little circles surrounding the Golgi apparatus. Those are called vesicles. Those are basically your cardboard boxes. Proteins and other materials that might need to move somewhere within the cell or even leave the cell are going to be packaged in these vesicles, and they're going to leave the Golgi apparatus. Once they're dropped off, those vesicles will actually fuse back into the Golgi apparatus, and the process continues. So it's a very fluid, moving organelle, And it's very necessary to make sure that if I have a transport protein, it gets to the cell membrane. If I have a signaling protein, it makes it outside of the cell membrane, and things of that nature. So that's why it's our post office. All right. The last organelle we're going to talk about that is found in all eukaryotic cells is the mitochondria. And this is a pretty famous one, as there's lots of jokes about how you never learn anything other than that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But if you remember that information, I'm pretty happy. So the reason it's called the powerhouse is because this is where your food molecules get broken down and energy is released. And you need energy to do work. So all of the other organelles are going to need energy to do their jobs. A living organism needs energy to grow and reproduce. And so when we eat and digest our food into smaller and smaller bits, we then need to get the energy out of that food. So you'll see the mitochondria here, they have it in a cross section, has its own two membranes. It has that inner membrane, giving it sort of those squiggly lines in the center, and then that blue outer coating you can see. So it has an outer and an inner membrane. It's very important for cellular respiration and for making all of the other jobs possible because we need energy. So because it's the powerhouse, I compare it to your power lines or electrical lines. That would give your whole city the energy and electricity it needs to function. Now, both plants and animals are eukaryotic cells, and all of the organelles we've talked about so far are found in both of them. But you've probably noticed that plants and animals don't look alike. So there are some different features to the cells. So here we have the organelles unique to just plant cells. So you would not find these in animal cells. The first one is the cell wall. So this is an extra layer around the cell membrane. Plant cells still have a cell membrane, they just get an extra layer of protection around it. Their cell wall is made of a sugar called cellulose. You've actually probably heard of the word cellulose, just as a different word called fiber. When you eat lots of fruits and vegetables, you get lots of fiber. It's the cellulose in those cell walls. So this is going to provide extra strength and protection, and it actually gives plant cells a more rectangular or square shape, as you can see in the picture. I don't really have anything clever to compare it to other than just an actual wall. The next thing that's unique to plant cells is the chloroplasts. Chloroplasts have a pigment in them called chlorophyll. And so this is what's going to give plants its green color. And you can see that the chloroplast here is also green. Similar to the mitochondria, it also is double membraned. So you have two membranes packaged around these stacks of pancakes here. In these stacks of pancakes, the process of photosynthesis is going to occur. So chloroplasts are where sunlight is actually converted into sugar molecules. This is what makes plants producers. It's what makes plants the start of all food chains. This organelle is extremely important because this is how we get the start of food that we can then later break down for energy. So I compare the chloroplast here to just a solar panel. You're taking in sunlight and converting that sunlight into usable energy. So the last thing that is unique to plant cells that we'll talk about is called a central vacuole. A vacuole is your water storage organelle. Animal cells do have vacuoles, but they are much smaller and we have multiple of them. Plant cells have one large one in the center, hence central vacuole. This is like a large pool of water and can fill up with a lot of water. Animal cells can't do this because we don't have a cell wall. If we filled up with this much water, the cell would actually burst because we don't have anything nice and sturdy to keep it in place. The plant cells, since they do have the cell wall, can fill up with that water and it can push on that cell wall and actually make it more rigid and upright. So again, nothing super clever to compare it to other than a pool of water. Inside this water, you'll also find some nutrients and waste from the cell, but the main function is water storage. Animal cells do have a couple of organelles that are unique to them as well. The first one is lysosomes, which I like to say is the lysosomes of the cell. So these organelles have digestive enzymes. So enzymes are proteins that help with chemical reactions. And in this case, the chemical reactions is to break down different particles. So the lysosomes use these digestive enzymes to break down anything that's worn down or cell parts that we don't want. So if you have a virus that's gone into a cell and you're starting to kill it off and you need to clean it out, or if you have a mitochondria, for example, that's no longer functioning, we need to break that down and clear it out of the cell. I compare this to a custodian or a janitor, somebody that's going to be removing the waste and cleaning up after the cell. The last thing we'll talk about is the centrioles. So the centrioles kind of look like a churro, as you can see in the bottom here. They're made mostly of proteins, and they're used as an anchor when we do cell division. So when cells are dividing and multiplying, there's a lot of movement happening with DNA, and we need to have a way to anchor the moving parts for the DNA, and the centrioles allow that. Again, since plant cells have a cell wall, they don't really need this, so this is unique to animal cells. And again, I just compared it to an anchor. So that's it for today on all the different organelles amongst all cell types. I hope this helps you better understand cell biology. Have a great day.